Brilliant. So welcome everyone. It's an absolute pleasure to welcome you to our, I should say February meetup, but to our February meetup. It's been a whole year since this group was launched. And today, in terms of agenda, we have, well, first I'll just say a few words as a welcome. In the first session, it's my absolute pleasure to have Daniela from Brunello Cucini on board, who will take us through how to build a decoupled architecture using MuleSoft on AWS. Then I will hand it over to Shresta, who recently joined MuleSoft, has done a whole host of different things in the world of integration. So it's an absolute pleasure that she's become a member of the Women Who Mule Meetup group. And then to finish, we'll do a quick event wrap-up. And without further ado, to be honest, I think, hi Mariana, so good of you to join as well. What I want to do is actually hand it over to Daniela, who is, she's an absolute trailblazer, is really active community member. Most recently, she became a MuleSoft mentor, which is huge congratulations again. Before other people joined, we were just talking about how I didn't realize that Brunello Cucini did a talk with Mark Benioff at Dreamforce in 2017. So I didn't know much about the company. If you're not familiar with the company, it's essentially a luxury brand in Italy. So it's just awesome to see the creative director behind it as well and start putting things together. So without much further ado, Daniela, over to you. I'll stop sharing my screen and looking forward to the presentation.
Okay, can you see my screen?
Yeah, it's all good.
Okay. Can we start?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay. We will start identifying the common problems when dealing with a distributed system. And then we will see how to build a decoupled architecture using MuleSoft and AWS, using messages and queues with a special focus on scalability, reliability, and security. But before we start, something about me. After my master's degree in software engineering, I've been working in IT and software development for about 10 years. In 2018, I joined Brunello Cucinelli and started to work with MuleSoft using the community edition until the 2020, when we decided to switch to MuleSoft and Enterprise. And now I'm currently MuleSoft certified developer, and I'm preparing for my MuleSoft certified integration architect exam. In 2021, I also got certified AWS Solution Architect Associate, and it was quite funny because when I was a child, I've always been told by my teacher that my head was on the cloud, and now I can understand what they meant. But let's start from the very beginning, from the definition of a distributed system given by Leslie Lamport. You know you have one when a crash of a computer you've never heard of stops you from getting any work done. This is a fun but really true definition, because when there are a lot of systems involved, you have to handle partial failures and unpredictable network latency that can also cause concurrent events and updates. We started from a complex ecosystem where insert and updates have to be propagated on every other system. We had many point-to-point integration. Some of them were using APIs, while some other relied on file exchanges, and some of them were using MuleSoft, while some other weren't. We have a very fragmented error handling and unpredictable update latencies that could cause overwrites anomalies. It was also really difficult to introduce new systems in this architecture because it was complex and it was not easy to understand where to link the new system. Our goals were to standardize the integration mode using REST APIs and propagate updates in an asynchronous, near real-time mode. We also wanted to avoid complex orchestration and to increase the maintainability of our system by facilitating the introduction of new systems in our architecture. During the design phase, we decided to mix and match two different integration patterns that were API-led connectivities and fan-out pattern. API-led connectivity is the pattern that we commonly use when building APIs with MuleSoft that suggests to split your API implementation in three different layers that are experience, process, and system. The fan-out pattern is nothing different than a publisher-subscriber pattern, where messages are created from a publisher and sent to a topic. The topic is responsible for broadcasting those messages to all the consumers that have performed a subscription to that topic. To build this pattern, we decided to use two AWS services that goes really well together, that are SNS, Simple Notification Service, and SQS, Simple Queue Service. We used SNS to build our topic, and SQS as a message receiver to receive messages from the topic and store them. So let's quickly see what happens in our architecture when a new message comes in. The message flows from experience to process API. The process layer sends the message to a SNS topic. The SNS service broadcasts the message to all the subscribers that are our SQS queues. And then the system layer API performs periodic long polling on those queues to retrieve new messages, process them, and send them to downstream systems. The main advantages of this architecture are, of course, the simultaneous propagation of the message to multiple systems and the decoupled architecture that we have, because we clearly divided message producers from consumers. And we also achieved greater scalability, because it's possible to size independently experience, process, and system API layers. There's no orchestration required to send messages, and the introduction of new systems is really easy, because imagine that you have to introduce a new message consumer. You only have to create a system API that reads messages from a queue and sends them to the downstream system. On the contrary, the propagation is asynchronous, so it requires asynchronous error handling mechanism. And we are exiting from the comfort zone of our MuleSoft VPC to use those AWS services. So we need to correctly configure a network so that messages are routed correctly and securely. We will start looking in more depth to the services that we used to build this architecture, starting from SQS, that is the service that we use to receive messages from the topic, store them. SQS Simple Queue service is one of the oldest the oldest services provided by AWS, and it's a fully managed service available in two different versions, standard and FIFO. The number of API calls per second in the standard version is unlimited, while you only get 300 of API calls per second for FIFO queues. The difference between standard and FIFO is that with FIFO queue, you have the guarantee that the order of messages is preserved. Those queues have a really low latency and a message retention that can span to 14 days. You also get support for batching. That means that you can process multiple messages at time, and the private endpoint and retry policy support. And we will see later what it means. To better understand how SQS configuration parameter works, let's have a look to what happens when a new message is sent to the queue. The first parameter that is applied is the delivery delay. That is the amount of time that Amazon SQS will delay before delivering a message that is added to the queue. It can span between 0 seconds and 15 minutes, and only at the end of this time, the message is made available to the consumers. Then the consumer issues a polling request to see if there are new messages in the queue. The polling request duration is defined by the received message wait time. This parameter is important in order to optimize the number of polling requests sent to the queue, and therefore also the cost. It can be 0 seconds, so it's called short polling, or something greater than 0, and it's called long polling. By that time, the consumer will have received a polling response, and the real countdown can start. The countdown is governed by the visibility timeout parameter. The visibility timeout parameter is the maximum amount of time that a consumer has to process the message. If the consumer fails to send a delete message request before the timeout expires, the processing of the message is failed. To handle this processing failure, the queue checks the max retries parameter. If the number of failures for that specific message doesn't exceed the max retries, the message is enqueued again. Otherwise, the message is sent to the configurer that deleted queue. Once that we understood how SQS works, creating a queue from the AWS console is really simple, because we only have to define the kind of service that we want to use between standard and FIFO, the queue name, and we have to configure the parameters that we just saw in action. The other important configuration is the dead letter queue. For every queue you create, you can choose if you want to enable this configuration, and if so, you have to specify the ARN of the queue to use as a dead letter queue, and the maximum number of retries that you want to support. The other service that we use is a simple notification service, such as SQS. It's a fully managed service, and it's available in the same two versions, standard and FIFO. It allows to decouple messages produced from consumers and to broadcast messages to all consumers at the same time. The subscription can be of two different types, that are application to application and application to person. With application to application subscription, the subscriber can be another AWS service, such as SQS, AWS Lambda, Amazon Kinesis, or a simple HTTPS endpoint. In application to person subscription, SNS can also be used to send mobile text, mobile push notification, or emails. The topic creation, it's really simple. You have to choose the kind of topic that you want to create, standard or FIFO, and basically only the name of the topic. The other important operation to perform on the topic is the subscription. To create the subscription, you have to specify the identifier of the topic, the protocol of the subscriber, and the ARN, so the identifier of the subscriber. In our case, we choose to use Amazon SQS as protocol, and we specified the ARN of our queue. To test our architecture, we have to send a message to SNS and see that we can receive this message in SQS. To send a message to the topic, we can simply use the AWS console with the publish message to topic operation, specifying the body of the message, or we could also use the AWS command line interface with the command AWS SNS publish, specifying the topic ARN and the body message, the body of the message. Same thing to receive the message on SQS. We could use the AWS console with the polling requests, or the AWS CLI with the command AWS SQS receive message, specifying the queue URL and the wait time second, that is the duration of our polling request. Now that we have configured and tested our AWS infrastructure, we have to deal with network and security. The first step to enable the exchange of messages between MuleSoft and AWS is to create an identity and access management policy to access SQS and SNS services. The policy is a simple JSON file that you can write by yourself or generate through the AWS Visual Editor. And in this JSON file, you can specify the effect of the policy, that is, allow or deny, the resource, and the actions that are affected by the policies. In our case, for the action, we have those SQS operations, and for the resource, we specify star. That means all the queues that we have in our account. We could be also more specific, specifying the ARN of the resources that we wanted to apply the policy to. The other steps are to establish a VPC peering between MuleSoft and AWS in order to use private endpoints to exchange messages in a private way. To enable the VPC peering, the classic way, let's say, you have to issue a support request to the MuleSoft support, and in your AWS console, you have to wait for the peering request coming from MuleSoft VPC, accept it, and then you can configure the routing to send messages back from AWS to MuleSoft. Another option that is important to remember is the DNS resolution option that must be enabled in our VPC. By default, SQS and SNS services expose public endpoints accessible through the public internet. But the problem that we wanted to solve here was that we didn't want our messages to traverse the public internet, but instead we wanted them to be routed to a private channel. To do so, we enabled VPC endpoints that are scalable, redundant, and highly available virtual network devices fully managed by AWS that enable a private connection between the AWS VPC and those services that support private link. So in our architecture, the traffic flows from our data center to MuleSoft VPC using a secure VPN connection, then from the MuleSoft VPC to the AWS VPC through the VPC peering that we enabled, and then the endpoint, the services inside AWS are accessed using those VPC endpoints in a private way, without ever crossing the public internet. The endpoint creation, it's really simple, but you have to remember that they are service specific. That means that we had to create two different endpoints, one for SQS and another one for SNS. Last but not least, I wanted to show you an example of a flow to receive and process SQS messages. Here we used the receive message from SQS as the event source. We do some operation on the message that we received. But the important thing to remember is that at the end of the flow, we have to issue a delete message request to the queue to confirm that we correctly processed the message. To perform those operations on our queue, we used the Amazon SQS connector. The connector configuration in the connector configuration, you have to specify the access key and the secret linked to the MuleSoft account that you want to use for the integration, the region that you are using, and in the advanced tab, you can also specify a custom endpoint that enables you to use those private endpoints that we seen earlier. To wrap up, we saw how API-led connectivity and fan-out pattern based on SNS and SQS can help us to build a decoupled architecture to send message updates on a distributed system. We also worked on the reliability of our system using retry policy and dead letter queues. And we defined a private channel of communication for our messages, increasing our security. Further developments could be the integration of AWS Transit Gateway, that is a network device that you can use to connect multiple VPC in a transit way. And imagine that you have to connect your data center, MuleSoft, and multiple AWS VPC. The transit gateway is the perfect fit because you can build a star network architecture and avoid point-to-point VPC peerings. Another improvement could be the usage of CloudWatch to set up alarms based on queue parameters, such as the number of messages in the queue, and perform auto-scaling policies linked to those alarms. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. We have time for questions. Let's go with the first one, because I have a question as well. I don't want to be rude. So from Ashutosh, apologies if I'm mispronouncing your name, is the core functionality of AWS SQS the same as Anypoint MQ, or is it different?
We decided to use directly AWS services, but Anypoint MQ is based on SNS and SQS. So under the hood, Anypoint MQ uses the same services.
That makes sense. Does that answer your question? Just in case there's any follow-up or anything like that. Also, if anyone else has questions, don't be shy. Feel free. I have a question while we wait. Apologies, this might be a stupid question, but for when you went through the slide looking at SQS and you talked about the different configuration parameters, why would you want to delay a message up to 15 minutes? I was like, what? What's the reasoning behind that?
Well, it depends on the workload and on, I don't know, if you want to make some time pass between one retry and the other, for example, or if you want to wait before processing the message.
Okay, so it's depending on if you want to retry, if it's failing or things like that. Okay.
You want to wait a little bit before processing the same message again, and so on. But you can set the parameter to 0 if you don't want to wait.
And then everyone can consume it straight away.
Yeah.
We have another question from Preeta. Why the fan-out pattern other than direct invocation of system APIs?
Well, we used the fan-out pattern because we had multiple systems to update at the same time, and we didn't want to make synchronous calls to do that because imagine that you choose the synchronous way. You have to call the first system, wait for the response, and so on, and you have a big process orchestrator that has to call every system API, handle errors, so it's a huge orchestration work. We decided to use this fan-out pattern to spread the message in a near real-time asynchronous way to avoid this orchestration and to send the message to all the consumer at the same time.
Do we have any other questions? Anyone else? As I was watching your presentation, it's really funny because as you go through it, I was like, at what point do we talk about Transit Gateway? Because it's like such a new thing that MuleSoft released. And I was just curious, in terms of further developments, what does it, I know that's essentially saying this is how we can prove it, but what needs to happen when you start adopting it? Is it like when you start to build out that architecture to more VPCs that you need to peer, or when would you introduce it?
We introduce it if we have multiple VPCs, and we don't want to do peer-to-peer connection between all of our VPC because it's not scalable. So if you have to connect multiple sources, Transit Gateway it's the perfect fit. When we started the project, unfortunately, it was not supported yet, but we had only 2 VPCs to connect, so our architecture was quite simple in that way. But if you have more than one, I think it's the perfect match. And moreover, you don't need to require support to the MuleSoft administrator to enable Transit Gateway. While in classic VPC, you have to fill out a form and send a support request.
Pain points why they introduced it, because it's just too much hassle. So that's very helpful. Final call for questions. If not, I would like to say massive thank you, Daniela. That was really great content. I've definitely learned something new. And it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on board. With that, I'll hand it over to Shresta. Let me share my screen first. And also just for the community who's tuning in, if this is the kind of content you really enjoy, if you want to see more technical content, just get in touch, let us know. Shresta will talk about how you can do that as well. So it should close the gap.
Thank you.
Hopefully you can see my screen. Yes. Let me see if I can make that. Okay. I'll leave it as is. Over to you.
Thank you, Therese. And first of all, I would like to thank Daniela for such an insightful session on the VPC. A lot of things all of us didn't know, and post your session, we have some insight to it. So thank you for that. And again, as we welcomed you all, I mean, thank you for coming and attending this Women Who Mule Meetup for the February. So I would just like to, without taking much of the time, I would like to give a brief introduction about myself. So my name is Shresta Singh, and I've been in the field of integration for the past 7.5 years. Currently, I'm working as a technical consultant in MuleSoft. Prior to this, my experience was majorly, in integration development. I was responsible for development of various integration solutions in the banking and the insurance domain. So I've been associated with organizations like Wipro And I've also worked for Citibanamex for a short stint of time, but yeah, it was very valuable. And then I joined Accenture, where I worked in the insurance domain. So yeah, that's I would say crux about me. So it has been an explorative journey, and again, I'm so proud to be part of MuleSoft. And so let's just start with the community feature of Women Who Mule. Let's just move to the next slide. All right. Okay, so the first thing that comes to my mind, and even you also must be curious, that what makes this meetup group so special. Basically, what I think, it's one dedicated to all the women developers and all the passionate architects, all the MuleSoft practitioners, who are passionate about this technology. Everyone we need allies. We always, look for diversity, and we're a very inclusive community, and we're trying to build up. We're very new. We started off, in February, and our mission here is basically to make this a living forum, to be very precise. And we need people like Daniela and the previous elite speakers who had come to this meetup, and you all who have been practicing MuleSoft for so long, to just come up and share your knowledge, your experiences, give your ideas. And everybody is also welcome here in the Women Who Mule. So welcome all. So let's move on to the next one. Right. So just to give you a little bit of history, the Women Who Mule community, it launched in February 2021, which was an online group as a global group. It started in AMER. For those of you who do not know about this, AMER is basically, the theater, which consists of all the, as the map all suggests, that it's about the, and then we've got, which was launched in June, which is the theater I and Therese belong to in MuleSoft. So we're covering all the European, Middle East, and African countries. And then the third theater is JPAC. JPAC is basically Japan and Asia Pacific region, which was launched in August. So we as an EMEA group were launched in June 2021. And again, it was all possible because of people like you who had signed up for it, and organizers who had sponsored it. Therese is one of the founders of the EMEA ones, and we have other leaders also associated with it for the EMEA theater, and they belong to different diverse backgrounds. So basically, we'd started off deciding that we would be hosting, various meetups, and where people are going to voice their experiences, bring out their stories, and talk about technical topics which are, relevant for the MuleSoft world, where we as practitioners, we practice. So again, so this is one mission that is very much near to our hearts. This is actually, and you'll be very surprised to know that it's our 1-year anniversary in February. So happy anniversary, everybody, to all the members, and thanks for making it possible and making it a reality. And yeah, again, which I would also like to talk about, so the wide range of topics that we discuss over these meetups, they're always very valuable for all of us in terms of a knowledge base. So how did we achieve it, and what were our accomplishments in the past year? If you look at it, we've organized 15 events globally with now we're a 500 plus members, stronger community. And with that, we're also, maintaining it is so lovely to have the diversity of speakers. We've got a very good blended mixture of partners, customers, and MuleSoft practitioners who are at not at really equal stages. They're at different stages in their careers. Either they've just started or they've specialized. So they have a lot of roles, that they're adorning in this IT world. And it's always so amazing to listen to them. And so in the past, we've had very, very different speakers from Accenture Spain, and then we had a MuleSoft ambassador, Liliane. She was from Bentley Motors. So So the timeline has been completely very, and we've also collaborated with a lot of D&I groups. Like it was just their codename Maxine, which is basically, a Deloitte group which talks about inclusivity, inclusive language in the workplace, and such, fire topics that are very important for us as professionals in this IT world. So this is basically just to highlight the EMEA timeline and how we, from the month we launched in June, we had some esteemed industry stalwarts like Laura Chavarria and David Perez, who shared with us their amazing experiences. They've been in the industry for so long, like 22, 23 years. And then in September, we had Leanne, who had shared her story with MuleSoft, how she got on with it and, got on board with it. And now she's working as, she's a MuleSoft ambassador, amazing. And then codename Maxine also had a session, during that meetup. And in November, recently, Tricia Haman from MuleSoft training team also, took to the stage, and she gave us her insights. And most recently, we've got Daniela, who shared her amazing, architecture, decoupled architecture story, which is so great. So this has been our highlights for the past year. And if we move on, right. Okay, so again, the goals for 2022, we are looking at growing the community, and we would love to have more and more members who practice MuleSoft. And again, we're looking at people. We start hosting such in-person meetups also, not just virtual, because I know pandemic is going on and the situation is very tricky right now, and we cannot really meet in person, but would love to host in-person meetups where we can host it as for the EMEA theater. London is again a chosen first location. We're definitely planning something on April and May, and also various locations across EMEA. So again, just growing and still growing, and we wish that we, from all your support and all the insights, and we keep evolving. So basically, how do we do that? How should you go about it if you as a member want to contribute to this wide podium and come up and voice your experiences, your knowledge about MuleSoft and various topics that you want to cover, and let us know what exactly you want these meetups to be about. So exactly, so it's all about we as members built this community, and again, we only have to sustain it with all our insights and information. So again, I'm going to talk about a very amazing feature that we recently introduced in our Meetup page, which is, so if you have an interesting topic and you want to share your content ideas, and you want to just become a speaker like Daniela and Leanne, all you've got to do is you just have to navigate to our Meetup page, and then click on this contact the organizer button, and then you can summarize your idea and whatever you're looking for, you want to discuss related to the various technological changes and digital transformations using MuleSoft. You're all welcome. This is one unique podium, and this is your safe haven where you can just come in and give in your ideas. So you just have to summarize your idea, and then you have to also don't forget that your target theater is EMEA. So, and you can just press send, and we will have a look, and we are looking forward to basically hosting more and more people in 2022, so that we can increase our knowledge base about various topics. Like today we covered decoupled architecture using AWS, amalgamating with MuleSoft EPC, which was so informative, I'm very sure. So just don't be hesitant, and just use this amazing feature that we have for our community. And with that, I would not take much of the time, and I would hand it over to Therese.
Cool, that was perfect. As always, as I've said, we like to keep these short and sweet. But as part of this, we see it's very important to share what we want to achieve going forwards, what some of our goals are, and how important it is to get your feedback, to hear from you, and really give you the opportunity as well to share your stories, experiences, ideas, things like that. So I hope that's the timing in terms of 1 year anniversary. Let's look at what's coming next. I hope you enjoyed that. And I can't stress enough, please get in contact. Always happy to hear and explore what we can do in the future. So I'll just briefly wrap up. And again, if there's any questions for us, Shresta, don't be shy, feel free to post. As always, please, if you enjoyed it, the hot topics you heard, post it on social media, make the community better known, invite your friends, colleagues, maybe you work with someone who's really inspirational or you think would be an awesome speaker and the community would really benefit from hearing from them. Also, there is an option to join the Meetup community. So when there's other events happening or things like that, you're the first to hear about it. And yes, if you want to be a future speaker, please get in touch. Actually, the whole feature part was inspired by Daniela, because she reached out to us and said, hey, I have a really interesting topic for this. So we just want to make sure everyone's aware of that, and you know that we're open and happy to have you on board. So with that, I would like to say a massive I hope you enjoyed it, and have a lovely rest of the day, afternoon, evening. For me, it's starting to be evening now. And yeah, thank you. We're all good.
Thank you for joining, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.